What's up, guys? We got Adrian Bowman here in Lothric, and we're gonna see if he can survive here for a whole week without... Nah, I don't think I can keep that voice or these stupid moving subtitles up for this whole video. Doing that voice for like 20 minutes in the class test video was cringe enough. Although I will say that because of that experience, I kind of fell in love with the bow. Which is why when I put it up to vote on Patreon, I was excited to see the return of Adrian Bowman win out. Then the finger on the monkey's paw curled. Oh, yeah, I've started doing polls for Patreon members, by the way. More on how to join and support the channel later. Okay, let's get right into the run. Bow only. It's not exactly a new concept here, but pretty new for me. And I was too excited after doing in DS1 to care if this was an original idea or not. So, first things first, we need to go kill Gundyr, but with a bow. To start out, we have to pick the Thief class since it's the only one that starts with a bow, in this case a short bow, and here is where we come across our very first wrinkle. We only have 30 arrows to start out, with no way of obtaining more. Maybe if we were doing a crossbow run, we could try our luck with the ranged hollows here, but they only drop crossbow bolts, which means they're no help for us. The result is that we only have one chance to beat Gundyr with as few arrows as possible, or we'll be forced to fully reset our character in order to try again. Fortunately for us, I'm a complete Chad and get Gundyr on my first try. Actually, it comes extremely close, and I probably could have gotten the kill with like 10 less arrows. So this is more like I got extremely lucky and locked in at exactly the right moment. The reason why this could have gone wrong is that there are 3 levels of damage that we can inflict on Gundyr. The standard damage of a normal attack hitting him anywhere on his torso or limbs, the extra damage and potential stagger that comes from hitting him in the head, and finally, a quick shot that whips out after dodging, which does heavily reduced damage in exchange for completely reducing the draw time. As a result of my minimal ammo count here, I get a pretty negative view on that dodge attack, even though I'll eventually have access to way more ammunition, so prepare for it to take a while before I start relying on that again. Anyway, between my various non-optimal shots here and even a few misses, we make it with exactly 30 arrows. Finally into Firelink, and we can use the Gundyr souls to buy some wooden arrows from the Shrine Maiden and grab less levels than usual on some extra vigor. I also completely forget to do the tree skip for the free Estus Shard and Silver Covetous Serpent Ring until a little while later. And that ring is extremely useful for this run, so yeah, don't forget that. Most of the high wall is running at full speed while we avoid combat as much as possible. Considering that each attempted attack costs us 5 souls right now, and each enemy takes a few attacks to go down, and I miss a lot, there is a chance of actually running out of souls here, which will kill this run dead. That is, until we get to the Dragon Bridge, which will be our passive soul farm for the start of this run, which I will basically never use. Yeah, this run is in a perpetual state of always being soul poor, but also having a consistent influx of souls to keep the run going. So this passive farm never gets used. Although we will eventually find some farms to use later on that offer better soul gains and cost minimal arrows, with the benefit of at least being a little more active and therefore fun and interesting. While we're here, we also pick up a longbow and some Titanite shards, which will let us level the short and longbow to +1. The longbow doesn't get the dodge attack, but does extra damage with each hit over the short bow, and that makes it somewhat preferable if I'm worried about conserving arrows. It also has a larger range, but that rarely will come into effect against bosses. Although, even without the dodge shot, the longbow's draw speed is also slightly slower than the small bow, so it's always a trade-off there. Next up though, we need a free Grey Rat, which will let us buy standard arrows, and therefore means we've gone from starting with 30 for a boss fight, to being able to bring almost 200 into the next. 198 exactly, but still close enough. Then we can head on to Vort. It's always embarrassing to die to Vort, which is why I don't. I do have to Ember in order to survive, but I make it through in one. There are definitely some growing pains here though, and the longbow proves to be a bit too slow for most boss fights. The short bow's draw speed helps it stand up to DS3's faster enemies. Turns out, that trade-off really isn't worth it once you have 200 arrows equipped against bosses that only take like 50 to kill. Onward to the Undead Settlement. Now that we actually have the souls to keep our arrow count high, we can start clearing out locations with our bow. But this does mean running into our mortal enemies, From Software's wonky collision physics, and the dogs. Even without the teleporting, DS3's dogs might be the worst in the series. Hate these little shits. Then, we also find the greatest weakness of the bow, an enemy moving casually from side to side. The Destiny hit scan bow this is not. Very slow projectile. We also picked up Yol while we're heading through here. We'll be getting a couple free levels from him, mostly to shore up our strength and deck so that we can use some of the later bows. After clearing out the big bonfire, the opening section of the settlement with our bow, which shows how great this weapon can actually be for clearing out locations, we head back to Firelink and finally pick up our silver snake ring. Also, while in Firelink, I decide I want a more fashionable fit, which means we need to kill Lenny. It's tricky at first, with Lenny blasting me to death more than a few times, but eventually we find a spot where he seems to be stuck and unable to properly fight back. It takes some time to get the kill, but we finally take him down and can buy his clothes from the Shrine Maiden, and get the silver mask from his drop. I know this covers up the beautiful face I've crafted for Adrian Bowman, but it feels appropriate, even if we do find an actually more appropriate hat later, and I don't put it on. Listen, I like the look, and I wanted the cool silver mask for the fun bow run. Also, the oddity of how DS3 handles NPC drops might make going back for the NPC only run here kinda tough. And interesting. Anyway, with that finished, we hit the normal points in Undead Settlement, make peace with Giant Archer, although we started with the White Branch this time, so that wasn't really necessary. And yes, I know there is something that can be gained from killing him, but as we will soon discover, the benefit there really isn't worth the effort. We'll rarely be at a distance for it to matter. Also, we help Onion Knight kill the big fire demon. But now it's time to get to those bosses. So this goes a lot better than I originally would have thought. While the Greatwood doesn't exactly sit there and wait for me to start wailing on its balls, the respite between attacks is more than enough to line up a shot or two. And it only takes a few shots to break each ball. Some attacks from the boss are even free moments to get a few more shots in, since I don't have to worry about AoE goo or falling rotten fruit. The biggest problem is avoiding the extra enemies, and at this point I'm still very much worried that I might run out of arrows before killing the boss, even though I went in with 200, which is way more than enough, so I don't bother killing most of the ads throughout the arena. Still, this is actually one of the easier Greatwood fights in a while. Then we leave by fighting the Outrider Knight. Totally legit. Definitely not cheesing him through a door he refuses to walk through. That's absolutely not what is happening on screen right now. No need to look up from folding laundry. You can trust me. I'm fighting him legit. So, the Crucifixion Woods are another quick run through. Again, we don't want to waste too much of our ammunition on the serfs. Also, we actually have something that we want to pick up here for once. The Grasscrest Shield. We technically could have had this on our back in some of our previous runs in DS3, but it wasn't thematically appropriate. This time, who cares? Thematically appropriate for an archer would be to have a side sword to fall back on, but I don't, so we're grabbing the Stamina Recovery Shield. Otherwise, we're rushing on through and heading out to Farron Keep. There are some items here worth grabbing now as well. Specifically, we want to kill these 3 Elder Gru in order to pick up the Black Bow of Ferris that drops when one of them is killed. I can't tell you which one. I'm literally watching the footage of me killing one, and I'm like, I guess it was that one? Kinda on the right? Another drops the Ferris hat, but we don't trade out the silver mask for it. We also pick up the Dream Chaser's ashes that will let us buy Titanite shards and immediately bump our weapons up to +3. In the meantime, we've also sent Grey Rat out on his first pillaging quest, which has given us access to the composite bow, which will replace our short bow. Likewise, the black bow replaces the long bow, and that is also only a temporary adjustment. Next up, we're heading back through the woods to fight the Crystal Sage. This one chews me up a bit. The biggest problem is that the main Sage doesn't like to stay out long enough for me to get a lot of damage in. So each attempt drags on for a while as the boss stalls over and over by diving into the ground. Fortunately, the roll shot can quickly take out the clones. Considering that getting overwhelmed by them is what kills my first couple of attempts, they are the most prominent target every time they appear. It takes some time, but eventually we get the boss down in the end. Hopefully we don't have to run into too many fights that stall out and take forever like this in the future. Hopefully. Once we're on our way to the cathedral, we can start to test out some alternative arrow types. For now, we've been sticking to wooden, standard, and heavy arrows. The heavy came from sending Grey Rat out to pillage and have now become basically my go-to arrow. But they are rather expensive. There are some others available at this point, but they are way more expensive, and I'll be doing more of a deep dive on them in a little bit. While we're here though, we also take a trip into the first DLC, because it turns out there is a great bow that we can pick up here, the Millwood Great Bow. We also get some ashes that will let us buy arrows for it. This is the strongest great bow in the game, by the way, but it has the shortest effective range. This will become very important for the upcoming boss. Speaking of which, so the Deacons of the Deep are a bit of a pill, and it takes a few tries. The biggest problem we run into here is actually aiming at the main Deacon, or whichever one he is possessing in the first phase. If we have a clear line of sight, we can kill the first phase ones with 2 or 3 arrows, depending on which ones he chooses. After that, some of the reticle aiming can help our shots slip past the other Deacons, but they clamor after us so fast that we're lucky to get more than 1 shot off at a time, sometimes even less than that. Fortunately, we can take that Millwood Great Bow we picked up and use that to blast through the group's Deacons. Using its weapon skill, we even managed to turn our arrows into explosives that pierce and flatten multiple enemies at a time, then explode after a short delay once they hit a wall or the ground. It takes some time to line up the shots, but it gives a wide allowance to actually smash the main Deacon for a while, which after a few attempts, finally goes down. With the Deacons finished, we can head back and finish up Barren Keep, which basically means light the fires and now we're directly into the Abyss Watchers fight. This goes surprisingly better than the last 2 fights would have led me to believe. For one, the composite bow quick shots deal some decent damage. And then when the backup shows up, I can stay mostly out of the fight and get my shots off from a distance. Things get a little more spicy in the second phase, and not only because of the addition of fire damage, it's a lot harder to keep my distance and make my shots, even with the composite bow. Still, we muscle through and we get our win. For the most part, we manage it by baiting out his charging ranged attacks, the kind folks usually use to backstab farm the Abyss Watchers, and use that as our opportunity to get a shot or 2 in. While I expect all of the skeletons in Karthus to give me a lot of problems, that doesn't appear to be the case. Yeah, somehow the skeletons don't really gang up on me, and when they do, I can usually roll out of the way. No upgrades on the build to note here, yet, so we move on to Wolnir. It's always embarrassing to die to Wolnir, which is why Whatever. The bow's actually pretty decent at getting the kill, but you need to attack with precision. These rapid-fire attacks on the hands aren't doing it. You've got to actually hit the bracelets. So dodge, line up your shots, and fire off 1 at a time. Eventually, Wolnir goes down. It's a slower Wolnir than I'm used to, and requires a lot more patience to line up the shots at the correct time, but I'm a lot safer for a lot longer throughout the fight. Except for the end here, when I somehow thought the mist would disappear after he dies. Of course Dark Souls couldn't be nice like that. Now we're heading into Irithyll very quickly, but we aren't staying. The Sullivan Beast goes surprisingly well here, actually. Regardless, getting past the beast and then through the barrier is really more of a formality in order to get Grey Rat to start pillaging again. In this case, we send Grey Rat out, get Onion Knight out of the well. There is an alternate route that doesn't cost as many souls by talking to Patches, but I know better than to rely on him, and with how many times I've murdered him for the Crescent Axe in DS1, he knows better than to help me. Next up, we head into the Smoldering Lake to finish up Grey Rat's questline, which almost has a bit of a wrinkle for me here, in fact, because the regular bow won't knock the bridge over, and I can't even get the army of skeletons to get it to knock over either. Instead, I have to use the Millwood Great Bow's explosion in order to get the bridge to finally fall out. First up, we've actually got another new bow to grab while we're here. Yeah, there are a ton of bows in DS3, and a handful of them are apparently taken straight out of DS2, including this one we find on a cliff past the Black Knight heading up to the giant Avalon. This gives us the Dragon Slayer bow, which has the highest AR out of all bows. It also has the same range and draw speed as the longbow, so we're sacrificing a little range from the black bow to the Dragon Slayer bow. That being said, more AR means less arrows, which means we get to save some of our souls for actual levels, most of which are dumped into a combination of vigor, strength, and dex. Now that we're geared up, it's time to go fight the boss, Old Demon King. So this is a great time to mention some of those other arrows we've been gathering as we continue. Our regular arsenal still is mostly the wood, standard, and heavy, but there are a few others worth noting, because they either inflict some sort of status effect or they deal elemental damage. For now, these include poison and fire, but will eventually be getting magic, dark, and lightning. Unfortunately, even though the much higher price would suggest that these should always be an improvement, 9 times out of 10, they will do less than the heavy arrows, sometimes less than the standard ones. Honestly, I think this right here is why bows are such an underutilized tool in the From Software catalog. At least in the current Souls era, considering that bows were actually some of Charlene's best weapons in Evergrace. That's twice I've mentioned Evergrace in DS3 videos in as many weeks. But yeah, if there's a bad weapon in the Souls series or Elden Ring, it's probably pretty good in Evergrace. It feels like the arrows here weren't like play-tested, you know? I remember noticing a similar issue when running the numbers in D&D, where a +1 bonus with magic arrow over the regular kind causes the arrow to be like 10 times more expensive for a resource that you'll likely have to buy a ton of. Like 1 extra damage on top of the 30 a mid-level ranger can do per shot and a 5% increase for accuracy is not always worth multiple gold per shot. The same goes for Dark Souls, which often has fire and poison and whatever arrows that are super expensive but don't really offer any additional damage, even when an enemy is weak to their damage type. Anyway, all of that is to say that I bought 99 poison arrows for 120 souls each, used 46 of them on the Old Demon King, and never actually poisoned him, basically wasting 5,500 souls looking for a poison me that never happened. 5520 to be exact, but who's counting? I'm not sure if I wasn't shooting him fast enough or if I stopped too early or what, but it never happened, even though the wiki said he should be susceptible to poison. And I mean wiki., not Fextra, so ideally this information should be good. Otherwise, Old Demon King is fine. It's a long fight, but we can stay out of his range most of the time and pepper him with plenty of arrows. Now that Grey Rat is safe, we have access to our heavy arrows again, as well as some of those other useless arrows. Oh, and some great arrows for the great bow, which is to say fucking spears we throw into our portable ballista. Anyway, in Irithyll we can continue forward until it's time to kill Sullivan. So regardless of which bow we use, these weapons are extremely slow, and Sullivan is notoriously one of the hardest bosses in the game, which is why naturally, this only takes me 2 tries. Yet, turns out if you step back from Sullivan, he'll spend most of the fight lore walking towards you, fully allowing you to shoot him in the face forever. Okay, not forever, but it's remarkably safe. However, even during the second phase, when the Sullivan clone appears, the fight is pretty easy with a bow. Only this time, instead of getting him to slowly walk towards you, the trick is to bait out his jumping attacks. Since the clone usually attacks first and then Sullivan does the same attack, you can simply repeat the same dodge sequence twice in a row and then wait for the jumping attack and start unloading arrows until he goes down. Honestly, I'm starting to forget why this guy used to even give me problems in the past. A soundbite that surely won't age poorly as I keep diving into DS3 runs. We run through Enerlando as quickly as possible, stopping only to shoot the NPCs to death. These two don't really bother to dodge much, so it's not too difficult as long as you aren't being overwhelmed by too much. Otherwise, we pick up another great bow, the Dragon Slayer great bow, but we won't be using it as we continue. The Millwood great bow is objectively the better option between the two. Although there is a third that could be potentially a better pick in certain circumstances, but I still won't be replacing the Millwood, even though I do eventually pick up that other great bow. Time for Aldrich. So, Aldrich goes mostly fine. Like, he kills me a handful of times, but altogether I only spent like 20 minutes between all of these attempts, which is not long in the grand scheme of things. Although the final attempt does take like 5 whole minutes to beat him. Hopefully, nothing coming up is that annoying again. The biggest shakeup here is that Aldrich has a lot of ranged options. Thanks to the Gwendolyn body he's still in the process of devouring, sticking out of the top. Pretty sure that's the lore implication here. Anyway, the ranged arsenal from Gwendolyn means that we can't use the same strategy we leveraged against Sullivan. Being at a distance puts us in more danger than it does him. So we have to get up close, fire as fast as we can, which is to say using our composite bow, and get off pop shots between rolls. Honestly, this has been one of the more fun aspects of this run, seeing how different bosses behave when you're attacking from a distance. Like, I never would have expected Aldrich of all bosses to be a problem from way back here, and it became a much more difficult and complex fight than the last few times I've gone up against him. Even with every speed bump we've run into up until this point, from the Deacons to Aldrich, this may be some of the most fun I've had with DS3 in quite some time. These Adrian Bowman runs really are incredible. Alright, time to head into Irithyll Dungeon, where I have too much footage of shooting the jailers from a distance. A 10 out of 10 strat for dealing with them. Like, why risk yourself to constantly bash everything with big, bonky hammers and slashy swords? Skyrim had it right the whole time. Stealth Archer for the win. And before we know it, we're through to the Profane Capital and our next boss fight. Time for Yorm. I put the H in different locations every time I type out his name. One day I'll commit it to memory. Anyway, Big Boy is going to need a big bow. And yes, I've decided to fight Yorm without Onion Knight for all of you babies out there saying I cheated in my last 2 runs. I haven't actually gotten any comments about Yorm at the time of this writing, so y'all are good. However, I did decide to use save states for this fight since it was going to take a lot of my great arrows to take him down, and they are extremely expensive. So in order to save having to run out and grind between each attempt to get more arrows, I would load a save and have my full stock back in my quiver. Anyway, this is the single worst decision I make throughout this entire playthrough. In fact, I blame this single fight for being the reason that the rest of this run is the most frustrating experience in the history of my channel, and is solely responsible for the ending of this entire video. Because this took me a full day to complete. And I don't mean like, oh, I spent a couple hours on it. No. I woke up, started fighting Yorm, fought him for several hours, skipped lunch, kept fighting him for several more hours, skipped dinner, grinded for materials and levels to come back and fight him again a little bit stronger, then finally went back and spent the remainder of my day fighting him until he finally died, then went to sleep. That was my entire day. This. Over and over and over and over and over, and that was with loading save states. So, what's the trick here? Well, there are a few. First, we're going to aim for Yorm's head, hoping that we can eventually stagger him after getting enough shots in the face. Too bad Yorm loves to move around and either block the shots with his shoulder, which reduces their damage by half, or dodge them entirely by simply turning, which reduces the damage by full. Or circumvents it entirely, I guess. So, we need to find the correct attack to actually bait and respond to. For a while, I think it's this overhead swipe that ends with Yorm taking a hot minute to recenter. The only problem with that is that sometimes he'll instantly move into his next attack before the windup even feels like it's finished. So, it isn't perfect. By the end, I realized that the actual best time to get the hit in is after his 3-hit slashing combo. Specifically, you need to start reeling the shot back as the 3rd hit starts up, which you also need to be close enough to bait out throughout the whole combo, and then release the second Yorm picks back up. Hit him enough times and he'll eventually fall to one knee, hanging his head low. Normally, this is when you can get a good riposte on him, but in our case, it means we can put a free arrow through his head. Granted, if this arrow hits on target, it deals about 3 times the normal amounts of damage. Literally, the Great Bow goes from dealing 500 against the head to 1500. It's a massive boost. The trigger for this stagger also appears to be based on total damage, although I don't know the exact amount, and it seems like there might be a minor effect where the stagger level lowers over time. This allowed me to sometimes keep Yorm in a stunlock loop, but it was inconsistent and wouldn't keep up forever. So while I assume the stagger meter drops him at about 2,000 damage with a slow tick down whenever he isn't reacting, I can't fully confirm it. Hell, after I upgraded my damage, the loop was even less consistent. So I guess going over that damage cap for the stagger resets it entirely. Still, after all of this garbage, I finally get the fucking kill and move the fuck on. Oh, and the final attempt took 15 minutes. So all of those attempts that got close but died right at the end, yeah, those were at least 10-minute runs. Some longer, some shorter, but definitely averaged at about 10 minutes. And each time, I had to reload my save state and try again. It was agony. What's next? Fuck. Okay, so Dancer isn't exactly as difficult as Yorm, but this does still take a while to get through. Expect that to be the theme from here on out. Fights will either take upwards of 10 minutes to complete a single run, or take me several hours to get down to the point that I can actually grasp my victory. Or both. In the case of Dancer, the fight is about 5 minutes. Nothing close to Yorm, but when I get a handful of runs close, only to have to restart again, this challenge is pretty quickly starting to drain me, and I'm not even close to finished. Moving on. The bow continues to be pretty useful against regular enemies, mostly because it is able to lure them out one at a time when I need it to. Who'd have guessed that a bow would actually have utility in an action fantasy RPG? Both of these bows are also relatively powerful and can take out the smaller cannon fodder enemies with 1 or 2 shots. It's also at this point that I realize exactly how minuscule the difference is between the different types of arrows I've been using. Like, we've already gone over the elemental ones, but even between the wood, standard, and heavy arrows, once the bows are getting close to their max level, the difference in damage is only like a few points per shot. It usually takes the same amount to kill an enemy regardless of which one I use, except for on rare occasions where that slight advantage is enough to barely push the heavy into 1 or 2 shot range instead of 2 or 3. Also, killing the pus of man out of the dragons is extremely easy this way. In fact, after killing the first one, I was able to simply aim across the way and kill the second one from a distance. Neat stuff. Okay, boss time. Let's get to that Dragon Slayer armor fight. Fuck me. This actually goes pretty well for a while, with pretty much every run getting past the first phase and into the second. Of course, that does mean that every attempt takes about 6 minutes, only for me to die and then start the slog all over again. Like, the problem isn't even the damage is fine, per shot at least. The problem is that the bows take so long to draw back and fire, and even the dodge shot doesn't quite whip out fast enough to always avoid trading blows with bosses. It's like trying to use an ultra greatsword that deals the damage of a dagger. But every time I see an arrow hit, I know that the fight is doable. So why not go for it? Do it. Finish it. So yeah, another several hours of my life wasted on attempt after attempt until finally I get the win. Onward to who fucking cares. Twin Princes time. And here we go, another slog. Actually, the biggest slog since Yorm's. And for the rest of the run. Only about half a day this time. Only skipped dinner for this one. We'll skip through the hell that was the learning process of the fight, maybe do a little death montage if I'm feeling frisky in the edits, and get right to what actually won the fight for me. It was the same thing as Sullivan. Keep your distance, and Lorien will wind up lore walking, or crawling, towards you slow enough that you can get an endless barrage of arrows off on him, in the first phase at least. Even that isn't entirely true, because at a certain point, he'll go ahead and decide to teleport right on top of you, or behind you, or to the side of you, and his wind-up before teleporting doesn't always align with the attack that he's going to do when he lands. Then, in the second phase, Lothric will periodically cast magic, which can be easily dodged, but if he uses the homing holy masses thing, then Lorien will teleport every time, so be prepared for that. As for trying to simply hit Lothric while he's on his brother's back, it's never going to happen. I mean, it does, randomly, but even when I try to aim specifically for Lothric's arms, legs, or head, it won't damage him. So I have no idea why it sometimes hits him and sometimes doesn't. Then, when Lorien falls over, get some shots in on Lothric, making sure to circle strafe around the two in order to catch Lothric as he's getting all the way up for one extra hit before focusing on Lorien again. Rinse and repeat for 9 minutes, and you're done. Only took me all night to get the winning run out. We now have the chance to go for the ending. Please, let me be done. Oh, but we can't do that. Now can we? We've got unfinished business to take care of. Unfinished business number 1. Osiros. 3 attempts, not terrible. Final attempt takes 5 minutes because of the super low DPS, but who cares? We're already through here and moving on to the Untended Garden fighting champion Gundyr. Gundyr pins me into a corner on the first attempt. What is this, Liza P? Second attempt wastes 3.5 minutes I'll never get back. 3.5 minutes I could have spent being happy, but instead, I'm doing this. It's Gundyr, but his second phase is more, faster Gundyr. Shoot him a bunch, dodge, shoot him some more. He's dead. On to Archdragon Peak. Oh, look at that. Can't plunging attack Ancient Wyvern. Hardy, har. You know, I think some stress has been building up in me as I've been going through this run. So in moments like that, it's good to sit down and find a time to be meditative. And I don't mean like sitting in a candlelit room, doing yoga and thinking about puppies and waves on the beach, although that sounds kinda nice. No, anything can be meditative if your mind is only on that one thing that you're doing. Not concentrating, but open and allowing the stream of consciousness to fall out into your current activity. And that's what I did here. In the 15 minutes that I spent shooting this stupid dragon in his stupid face from the safety of my stupid little hidey hole. I only had one single thought, and it was dedicated entirely to the task at hand. It was, die, fucking die already, die. Felt good to release that pent up. Rage doesn't seem to cut it. I'm honestly at a loss for words. But it's past now, which means we get to fight Nameless King. Okay, let's not be dramatic. This only took me like 45 minutes of attempts. Both phases suck. Shoot them a bunch. Can't get the riposte. Awesome. Then shoot the Nameless King a bunch. Composite bow go, well, not burr, but it gets the job done. Let's say that. Into the DLC. Fuck this. Fuck that. And I'm done. You know what? The question was, can we beat the game? And here we are, at Soul of Cinder. It isn't easy, but we get it. Fuck these bosses. Fuck Dark Souls. Fuck the bow. I hope my feelings for this run are pretty clear at this point. I really wasn't enjoying myself by the end. At the start though, this was super fun. It was way more of a challenge than the claws, and I actually had to come up with unique strategies for each new enemy and boss. When the lore walking thing for Sullivan finally clicked, that was probably the greatest moment in this entire run. Even Aldrich was interesting to notice that my range was a detriment instead of a boon for once. In fact, I can point to the exact moment where this run stopped being fun and started being work. Started being for the video. It was Yorn. Pretty obviously. That shit sucked and probably would have gone a lot better if I'd used a regular bow. I actually did try one run and yeah, it was way easier. Definitely could have gotten this in an hour or so that way, instead of a full day. So, yeah, I've only got myself to blame, but yeah, I really didn't like the final act of this playthrough. And even writing about it right now has me in a pretty bad mood. Which extra sucks, because I really loved the start of the run. It was so much fun, and such a fresh look at the series, but once enemies started having super high health pools and attacked so quickly that it was basically always about trading blows, my patience ran out. Maybe I'll revisit this and attempt the DLC later when I've cooled off, but right now, I'm taking getting to the credits as a win and calling it a day. I don't want to take this annoyance to Midir and Gale and ruin those fights. I was already salty enough when fighting Frida, and I love that fight as well. So yeah, there was nothing positive left to draw out of the later end of this run, no matter how fun the start of it was. Hey, it's that time again, the end of the video, where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon. Link in the description. And make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and even get to participate in votes on what upcoming content will be. Like this video right here. Thanks! Also, members get their name written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who have pledged in the top tiers get their names read out. Like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching.